السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. هل الانتخابات الرئاسية في سوريا ستغير المعادلات الإقليمية وحتى الدولية؟ وهل تؤكد فشل السياسة الخارجية الأمريكية؟ وكيف سيتعاطى الغرب مع نتيجة هذه الانتخابات؟ الانتخابات الرئاسية في سوريا بعيون المراقبين الدوليين من الداخل. معكم زينب صفار، تابعونا. التسونامي الذي شهدته العاصمة اللبنانية بيروت في 28 من أيار مايو الفائت للسوريين الذين نفروا إلى السفارة السورية في اليرزي لانتخاب رئيس لسوريا ما هو إلا موجة صغيرة أمام موجات السوريين في مختلف المناطق السورية إلى صناديق الاقتراع في 3 من حزيران يونيو لانتخاب الأسد لولاية ثالثة لمدة 7 سنوات. هذه الانتخابات التي جاءت بعد تعديل دستوري وبمشاركة مرشحين 2 إضافة إلى الرئيس الأسد حظيت بمراقبة دولية من قبل مجموعة من الخبراء الذين حضروا من كندا وأمريكا وروسيا وأوغندا وزيمبابوي وبوليفيا ولبنان والفلبين وفنزويلا وإيران وطاجكستان وإيرلندا، لا كممثلين عن حكوماتهم بل بصفتهم الخاصة للاطلاع عن كثب على مجريات العملية الانتخابية بكل تفاصيلها. المراقبون الدوليون الذين توزعوا على المراكز الانتخابية في مدن عديدة مثل حمص واللاذقية وطرطوس ودمشق وريفها والسويداء ومناطق أخرى أفادوا أن الانتخابات جرت في أجواء ديمقراطية تتمتع بالشفافية وأن الشعب عبر عن إرادته الحرة ومارس حقه المشروع. الخبير في العلاقات الدولية والصحفي الكندي السابق في الصحيفة الكندية الرسمية جلوبال ميل والخبير في قضايا الإعلام والتضليل الإعلامي والسياسات الكندية الأستاذ توني سييد كيف يصف مشاركته في مراقبة الانتخابات الرئاسية السورية في ظل ضغوط دولية كثيرة، وما هي المعايير التي قامت عليها عملية المراقبة، وكيف صورت وسائل الإعلام الرسمية في كندا الأزمة السورية وهذه الانتخابات، وكيف يصف أهمية الانتخابات الرئاسية ونتيجتها لسوريا في الداخل وفي العالم. Tony Seiid, Canadian expert in international relations and independent journalist who used to work formerly with the Canadian national newspaper, the Globe and Mail. Welcome to the Inside, sir.
Thank you again.
Well, before we go into the details of your observations as an international observer of the presidential elections in Syria, allow me to ask you here, why did you choose to come to Syria as part of this big international delegation to observe the elections?
Well, 2 reasons. First of all, it's not that I had 2 days notice. Mm-hmm. So I did not think pros and cons. I would say one is to be invited was a great honor, and I was humbled by it, and I think it is necessary to see with my own eyes what I have been analyzing in theoretical terms and political terms. Mm-hmm. That is to see the human reality, the social reality that the people of Syria have been facing.
Who invited you here, sir? You come in your own capacity, but not as a formal international monitor of the elections.
No,
right?
I was invited explicitly as an independent journalist by the People's Assembly and the Syrian Election Commission. Uh-huh. And in this, this was the immediate reason to come. Because in my writing, I'm not a detached expert. I use my specialization, or if you like, expertise or study, to combat the policy of Canada under United States imperialism, which is the policy of a rogue state.
Right.
All right? Now, the second aspect, why did I come? It is for me to realize a dream, if you like. It is a pilgrimage to Damascus, to Syria, and to the Middle East. It is the first visit I have made at this stage in my life, and maybe the last. So it is a visit of a lifetime, and I do not want to go home.
Now, allow me to go back to the subject of your observations here in Syria. Can you tell us about, the process through which you went down on the ground and monitored or observed the elections? Where did you start from? How did you start? With what did you start? Were you briefed by any Syrian side on the way or the track that you have to follow concerning your observations?
There are 3 delegates from Canada. And we went by plane and by car to Latakia district, to Tartus, and also to Homs by car. We met people of all ages, all walks of life. We were impressed by the extraordinary enthusiasm of the elector to vote. Somebody asked me, are these elections like elections in Canada? I said, today it is a festival. It seems to me to be a festival of the Syrian people and nation. This I saw mostly more in the working class and peasant areas. The extraordinary enthusiasm. And this, to me, was a great joy. It was a whole day of joy, personal joy, to see this firsthand. Okay?
What about the turnout and the balance?
The turnout, compared to Canada, was far greater. Okay? Right. Election in Canada is like this. It is a silent day. Election in Syria is full of noise, full of life, full of spirit. Election in Canada is a day of fear and foreboding amongst the working people. Working person goes in Canada to vote because it is his social and civic responsibility. But that night, he goes to bed and he has a nightmare because he does not know in the morning when he wakes up who will govern the country for the next term. Will it be this party of the rich or that party of the rich? Okay? This is why it says, to me, it was a matter of such joy. It was a festival, okay? Right. So yes, we talked with election workers. We saw how the voting was done, the registration, people so proud.
The indelible ink.
Indelible ink,
yes.
Right? I also saw people using the secret, to make the secret ballot. It was interesting that most who did that were women. I saw that a lot of people said, no, I want people to know I'm voting for Bashar. Right? And they put that there without going. No, you could call that.
Did you face any problems, or did the people face any problems during the process of casting the ballots? Did you see any? Did you report on anything? Did you take notes on anything?
No, I took notes. I myself did not see any, but that was not my concern. You can have technical violations, and I'm sure there were technical violations over here, or over here, or over here. For whatever reason. I am also sure they are the exception to the norm. The Election Commission has certified the results as being in fair and transparent process. I support that decision.
Right.
This election has been according to the Syrian norms. Okay. Second point I will say is this: Syria does not have to justify its elections to anyone.
Because the West, you know, today they rejected, you know,
So
the
what?
outcome of the elections.
So what?
My question here is, sir, despite this huge, massive turnout, not only on the national level here in Syria, but also in the embassies in the external world, what does that really indicate, this passion and this huge, massive turnout towards electing or re-electing President Assad back in office for a third term, a 7-year third term? What does that indicate, despite of the fact that various embassies across the world, they tried to shut their doors in front of the Syrian expatriates, denying them the right to vote?
The Harper War Government of Canada is one of those. It was one of the first governments which brutally severed diplomatic relations and expelled the ambassador. As a result, all Canadians of Syrian nationality eligible to vote in the elections were not permitted. There were no facilities in Canada to participate. At the same time, Government of Canada, very interestingly, it issued a statement halfway during the day of June 3rd, attacking the elections, that they're a fraud organized by a dictator who throws barrel bombs on the people and so forth. On the other hand, in terms of Ukraine, one statement after another, every day, up to the elections and the day of elections, that the right to vote is a cornerstone of democracy. And this is what is being realized in the Ukraine. Where there is fighting going on, where there's fighting going on, you can have legitimate elections. In Syria, where there's fighting going on, although marginal, these elections are illegitimate, okay? So Syrian people have nothing to learn from Canada or what it knows or doesn't know about democracy. It has nothing to prove to Canada. Canada violated the rule of law by denying the people of Syrian ancestry the right to participate in the elections.
Right.
It's another form of interference in the internal affairs
Of another sovereign country.
Because the Syrian people inside the country and outside the country are one.
Right. Sir, Mr. Tony, Seiid, we're going to stop now for a short break. But then when we come back, we're going to talk a bit further about the foreign policy of various countries in the West vis-à-vis the Syrian conflict and the Syrian crisis. إذن من الداخل سيعود بعد الفاصل. لا تذهبوا بعيدا. كبير المختصين في الشرق الأوسط في معهد واشنطن لسياسات الشرق الأدنى أندرو جي تابلر يقول إن فاز بشار الأسد في الحرب الدائرة في سوريا كما يبدو مرجحا على نحو متزايد، فإن سوريا ما بعد الحرب ستكون مكانا أكثر وحشية وفوضوية منها في أي وقت مضى. الخبير الكندي في العلاقات الدولية الصحفي توني سييد كيف يقرأ مقاربة تابلر وما تأثير حصول الانتخابات وفوز الأسد على سوريا من الداخل وفي الخارج.
The issue is this. One, the Syrian people have affirmed their sovereign will through the elections. Their confidence in the leadership and the heroic fighters of the Syrian Arab army. They have taken a stand for life. The only democracy, the only democratic choice the Syrian people had was not the plurality of candidates and parties based on 19th century liberal democracy that Europe and the United States advocates as the model for the world. The fundamental choice Syrian people and nation had was to live or to die. They took the stand to live. To live, they had to fight. This represents a victory of that terrible fight that has been waged with so much tragedy over the last 3 years. Now they're on the threshold of going to the next level. As long as this government relies on the people, and as they did in the election, they found ways to increase the participation of the citizen in the governance. And it did it quite ingeniously. How many ballot boxes? For example, I went to Tishrand University. They had a ballot box in every faculty and also in every residence. In university of comparable size in Canada, maybe they have 2 ballot boxes, because the aim is to disenfranchise the youth and students and to keep them out of political life, to marginalize, as they do the workers and so forth, okay? So in the urban areas, because of the threat of mortars and so forth, they put ballot boxes in many, many buildings.
So they facilitated the way for the people to participate.
Now, if we go ahead, how can this government also continue, if they continue on this basis, to facilitate the participation, also not only in governance, but in economic questions, in enterprises, in the regional affairs, in questions of other vital questions.
Right.
I'm sure it will go forward, and they will keep calling this government a brutal dictatorship, as they do Cuba, as they do the People's Republic of North Korea, and any country that chooses a path independent of Washington.
Concerning Washington, former U.S. Ambassador to Syria, Mr. Robert Ford, who left his post just a while ago, he told a U.S. mainstream media outlet that he could no longer stand behind his government. He said, quote, "I was no longer in a position where I felt I could defend the American policy. We have been unable to address either the root causes of the conflict in terms of the fighting on the ground and the balance on the ground, and we have a growing extremism threat." And also the Washington Post just also expressed the fact that, just having these Syrian elections is a failure of the American foreign policy. How do you read this?
The reason I said it was very interesting that the Canadian government issued a statement halfway through the day of the election is that it looked like they didn't want to issue a statement at all. That is, they did not want to even acknowledge that there was an election. In the leading newspapers of Canada, there was absolutely no report on the elections. Before the elections, and there was no election on the advance poll. What has taken place since then, I have been out of Canada, I'm not aware of. But in November, December of 2011, both John Barrett, External Affairs Minister, Hillary Clinton, former secretary, they all predicted that the days of Bashar al-Assad were numbered. This election and the war has been a debacle for them. And this is exposed in the John Ford statement, who is he is a criminal. He should be indicted for organizing subversion against Syria.
Robert Ford, you mean?
Yes,
Yes.
sorry, I'm mixing him up with a filmmaker.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But the other aspect of this is U.S. itself not only has a crisis in its policy and a number of fronts, but it is riddled with factions. That is, the ruling class of the United States, you have Obama faction, and you have forces behind Obama, and you have other forces. So clearly this is a result of the falling out within the factions. So in that sense, we should not be concerned at all with what he says, except that it illustrates that they're searching for a new way to subvert Syria, okay? They're not in the defensive, even though they have defeat, it does not mean they will be on the defensive.
Allow me here to ask you something, sir. Well, we've seen this very big portrayal of the people coming and flocking the streets and going to cast their ballots. So the opposition of the West is actually not an opposition of Bashar al-Assad, but it is against those people. Those people, they went down to the streets to cast their ballots and they chose to vote for President Bashar al-Assad.
U.S., with its typical disinformation, has tried to demonize Bashar al-Assad. Okay? They have called Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe a Hitler. They have called Bashar al-Assad, they called Saddam Hussein a Hitler. Now the Hitler is in Syria. Now the Hitler is in Russia. You know, son of the Queen came to Canada and called Putin a dictator, right? So this is a demonization. To suggest the other side is evil, well, we have the highest of ideals. Okay? So it is disinformation. That is to stop people from becoming informed. This will not...
How did the media outlets in Canada, so to say, the mainstream media, how did they read these elections and the outcome of the elections?
I have not seen the media reports since the elections, okay? But over the last 3 years, the reports are all based on, I would say, the fabrications. Okay.
Now, allow me to go back to a point of view of Flint Leverett and Hilary Mann Leverett. In their latest piece in the National Interest titled A Middle East Tragedy, Obama-Syria Policy Disaster, they argue that there is no polling or other evidence suggesting that anywhere close to a majority of Syrians wants Assad replaced by some part of the opposition. Indeed, the opposition's popularity appears to be declining as they become ever more deeply divided and ever more dominated inside Syria by al-Qaeda-like jihadis. Just last year, NATO estimated that popular support for the opposition may have shrunk to as low as 10% of the Syrian public. How many more Syrians need to die for the U.S. to rethink its policy towards Syria?
First of all, Syria, United States, if it rethinks its policy, which it will be for tactical reasons. The United States will not change its fundamental policy. Secondly, the assumption in your quote is that you have an opposition which is increasingly dominated by extremists, and then you have NATO support or U.S. support. And then the presumption there is whether it'll dwindle, all right?
Yes.
Okay. What has to be clarified is that opposition, which they are talking about, would not last for a single day without the U.S. and NATO behind it, okay? The presumption there is you have an opposition and then you have here another hand. But they're one hand of one body, and that body is U.S. imperialism and NATO, along with, and in that France and its friends, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, okay?
Yes.
There's no sort of religious extremism which is taking over, and whether or not the U.S. is supporting it, okay? This war is a U.S. war, and Syria, to my mind, must focus, sharpen the focus that it is U.S. war. People in Canada are told that it is a civil war. If people in Canada see that it is a U.S. war, Canadians are peace-loving people, they will not stand for it.
Right.
And they will rise up and they will oppose it, which is their responsibility. So Syria has to go on the offensive against U.S. imperialism and identify with full information in a scientific way exactly how this war is being conducted and analyze the next tactic, the next level, because U.S. will not change.
Right. Mr. Tony, Seyed, Canadian expert in international relations and independent journalist from Canada, many thanks indeed for joining us on this edition from the heart of Syria, Damascus.
I would like to finally say victory to the Syrian people.
Right, thank you sir, hopefully. إذا لقاء جديد في الأسبوع المقبل مع ضيف جديد وقضية جديدة ودائما من الداخل. للمزيد من التواصل بريدنا theinside@almayadeen.net وصفحتنا على الفيسبوك من الداخل، من كل فريق عمل من الداخل من كل الميادين من دمشق. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.